one can do to overcome it? How am I ever going to get even beyond this? How am I going to defeat this? And so later on in that same chapter, we're told that David, his father Jesse, sends David to the front lines because Jesse has 3 older brothers that are there. They're in the regular army, the ones that are sort of cowering because Goliath is out there threatening them every day, and they're sort of, twiddling their fingers and don't make eye contact, don't whatever you do. And so there, Jesse, David's father, gives the chore of sending David to the front lines with food to provide for the army of Israel. So there David goes. And David was just a lowly shepherd, very young, probably early teens. And so David, or Jesse, his father, sends him up to the battle to bring food to his brothers and to others that are there. And
they started at 7.
Oh, do they? Okay, well, it's okay. And so remember, Israel was used to this, but David wasn't. And there he shows up with the food and gives the food to his brothers. And Goliath is out there every morning and evening, it says, the Bible tells us in that story, in that account, for 40 days, challenging Saul and the armies of Israel every day and every night. And it also continues on in that same chapter where now David, we're told, is in the camp of Israel, and he himself hears those threats from Goliath with his own ears, and he sees himself what the effect of that is, that they're cowering backwards, aren't they? They're sort of scared and just avoiding the situation, just like I said, just like we can be in that similar situation, not wanting to confront this giant of an issue in our lives. And so we can become desperate, just like we're told the armies of Saul and Israel became desperate. We are told in that same account that he was willing, here's the king of Israel, he was willing to offer a cash award, a princess, tax exemption, a trip for 2 to Hawaii. No, I'm just kidding about that one. But if there was anybody in the camp of Israel who will stand up, all those things the king would give him. Do you notice that it's always the enemy, always the problem is the giant in the battle. Oftentimes, it's the one that always seems overwhelming. It's the one who always has the sword in his hand and has all the resources available to him. And if we're honest with ourselves, in our battles, in our storms, we feel the same way. And certainly we ask Jesus, is this really necessary, this battle? And we often pray, God, if you're really God, can't you just snap your fingers and take this away from me? I'm sure that's what they were feeling. This 9-foot giant ready to tear anybody up from limb to limb. Same with us. Same when we're facing that same issue or issues that seem overwhelming. But let's look at David. In verse 26, I didn't read this prior, but it says, and David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done? Oh, sorry, I read that part already. That was the part, what shall be done? What's the reward for the man who opposes this person? Yeah. Remember we were told that a cash reward, tax exemption, Saul's daughter, a princess, to be married. But if we look at David, he's not looking on the surface of that situation. He's not just looking at this monster of a man who's in front of him. If you will, he's not looking at what he himself could do in the battle. His concern was what and how this giant of a man was threatening the armies of Israel, the armies of God, he says. David was concerned not so much about his pride or the pride of the armies, but it was God's honor. And he asks the question, who is this man that defies the armies of the living God, is what he says. So he was concerned about God's honor in this battle. And he asks the question, who is this? He's troubled by someone actually coming and really battling God, if you will. And he's concerned. He's saying, who is this? See, he wasn't looking at these things from his own perspective, man's perspective, but he was simply standing on the promises of God. We're told later in that chapter when David tells Saul that he will do battle. David was willing because he says, I'll go in battle, because he gets upset and he's saying, who is this man who's dishonoring God? And David says, I'll go into this battle with Saul. And the king, Saul, he says, okay, wear this. This is my very own armor. And in a sense, again, we see a picture of when we come up with those issues in life, we try to use our own resources, don't we? Naturally, I guess. We try to do something to get out of that situation. And that's what that armor that Saul gave to David really represents. It's all that we can come up with. It's human effort. But we notice that in that same chapter, again, David says in verse 39 that he tried to go with Saul's armor. He actually put it on, but we're simply told it was in vain. He couldn't even lift the sword, probably. So he was just literally weighed down with what Saul had provided. Sometimes we get weighed down with our own efforts, in our own struggles against our own giants. And it was in vain. And God graciously and mercifully, He's saying, stop, stop. Don't believe this kind of illusion. That's not for those who have trusted in me. He's going to answer that question. Are these giants really necessary in my life and in your life? And God is going to say to David and to everyone watching at this point, yes, giants are necessary to prove to you that, in a sense, you can't win this battle with your own strength by putting on that armor. You're not strong enough. You're not even smart enough. And He does this for one reason: to remind us, to remind you and I in our battles against these giants that we're not God. But God is God. You see, David was willing to face any giant that came his way, even when the enemy was really talking down to them. He was talking trash to them. Come on out and I'll rip you apart and I'll feed your dead body to the animals. You know, that's kind of intimidating, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And in verse 43, this is what he says. He says, "Then David said to the Philistine, 'You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled.'" So that's a huge difference, because David knew God can only be faithful, even in our situations. He knew that the ability to slay this giant didn't rest in his own hands, in his own strength, in his smart, or his education, if you will. It rested in God's hands. Surely we're told that it wasn't the strength of David, remember? Because he's getting ready to go into battle, and he's got a smooth stone, and he's gonna sling it at this giant. Now, it couldn't have been David's own strength that slayed that dragon. It was God's ability. It was the breath of God that went behind that stone and did something for David, because he was standing on the promises of God. And that's what he told him. He said, "I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled." So that's our example today as well. When we're facing those giants, those impossible situations, God is here saying to us, Jesus is saying to us, you don't have to fight this battle. I'll be with you in this battle, and I will take care of that battle. Even though on the surface it looks like everything is hopeless and there's no victory that's going to come out of this, God is there saying and doing something miraculous.